Hello and welcome to our special broadcast. The big announcement coming in, the United States and India have agreed on a framework for an interim trade agreement after months of tensions, tough talk and wrangling. U.S. tariffs on Indian goods will now come down to 25% effective immediately. We know this because there is an executive order which the White House has put up on its website, and the executive order says that India has committed to stop buying Russian oil. Therefore, the ad valorem duty of 25% is being removed. And the 25%, I mean, you can call it penal tariff or Russia-related tariffs. I mean, this is being removed ASAP. I mean, the effective date is today. However, the 18%, basically, so 50 becomes 25. And we know that President Trump, and of course, earlier this week, we got that 18% number, that tariffs on India is going to be 18. That has been confirmed in the joint statement, which has been put out by US and India. But for the 18%, there is no date when this will come into effect. So the 18% tariff cut will come into effect once the final agreement is signed. And there is no date in any of the documents from our side or the US side, or of course the joint statement as well. Now, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal had said earlier this week that both sides were aiming to ink the final agreement by mid-March. However, as I said, no date has been set. Hopefully, this gets done, and it's a mere formality in that sense. That's what people in industry, markets, everybody will hope. The joint statement mentions that India will also slash tariffs on a wide range of agricultural goods, including fresh and processed fruits, soybean oil, etc. India will also buy $500 billion worth of energy products, aircraft, tech products from the United States for 5 years. I mean, this sounds more like that $500 billion number sounds more like a promise rather than a commitment. And we'll talk more about this. Interestingly, India's statement makes no mention on Delhi stopping Russian oil purchases. However, as per the statement released by the White House, and I quote, India has committed to stop directly or indirectly importing Russian Federation oil and has represented that it will purchase U.S. energy products from the United States. Remember, there is also in the executive order, which talks about the 25% penal tariffs going away, the executive order says that the U.S. Commerce Secretary has been directed to monitor whether this agreement, India holds up to its end of this agreement, which is to not buy directly or indirectly Russian oil. And, it basically says they reserve the right to take the tariffs higher if this agreement is breached. That's the sum and substance of that executive order. We will, of course, try and put all of this in context over the next 1 hour, but let me get in Shireen, who's with us as well. Shireen, hi, morning. Another eventful Saturday, Sunday. Good morning.
Prashant, I was just joking that we should just stay on in office because there's really no point leaving because 5 in the morning was when we saw these joint statements coming in, and we've been trying to understand and decode the fine print. So as you mentioned, I think that is the most important aspect, Prashant. Yeah. The cut that is effective as of today is 25. So we go from 50 to 25. That is the effective tariff rate on India as of today. Now, what happens next? When do we go to the 18%? As you pointed out, there is no timeline mentioned in either our statement or in the executive order issued by the White House, but the Commerce Minister had indicated that it was likely to be the middle of March, so we will have to wait for that. Again, very different tone and fine print as far as the issue of Russian oil is concerned. As you pointed out, the White House executive order makes it absolutely clear. In fact, in the words used there, specifically, India has assured, and the choice of the word specifically, India has assured that it will cut its imports of Russian crude, etc. The Indian statement is silent on anything to do with Russian oil. So that, and it also goes on to then say that this is going to be a development that they will be monitoring. And if there are any indications that India has restarted purchase of Russian oil, the US is free to impose the ad valorem tariff of 25% once again, or take any other action that it may choose to seem fit. So that's something that we need to keep in mind as well. And of course, the question mark on pharmaceuticals, on auto, and we'll have Ekta and our other colleagues joining in on that as well, because what will be the tariff line? Of course, the executive order says that the 232 investigation is on, and they will come back with an appropriate indication on what the tariff will be. So those are still some of the questions that remain. But at least as of today, what is certain is as of today, 50 has become 25%.
It has become 25, absolutely, Shireen. Let's get in our colleagues, right? Shireen, we've got Reema here. Reema, good morning. Vinny is joining us, and we have Sonal as well. Reema's, there is nothing on the bigger thing I can tell you for markets from an IT perspective, which Reema tackles every day, is H1B and people movement, etc. But that was not the ambit of what we are discussing here. She's talking about autos this morning. Reema, sorry.
I just wanted to clarify that this does not have anything to do with services.
No, nothing. It's just goods.
Exactly. Yeah. This is only about goods. There was no framework for services as part of this. So H1B, etc. None of that was part of the ambit as far as.
I was just saying that's when we talk Reema, we talk H1B, but autos, Reema, right? It says India will receive a preferential tariff rate quota for auto parts, right? That's essentially the term used. So what's the interpretation, here? Reema, take it away.
Well, it seems like Indian auto and auto components will now have a tariff of 18%. If you remember earlier, there was some confusion on whether auto and auto components will come under Section 232. If they did, then the tariff levied would be higher. But now I believe there is clarity and India will get exemptions under Section 232 for auto and auto parts, which means the tariff will be 18%. Just to quickly run you through some stocks where we could see a positive impact, the sentiment overhang lifted. Tata Motors, because JLR is highly exposed to the US markets, 33% of the volumes for JLR come from the US. So therefore, Tata Motors passenger vehicles, Tata Motors CV is not impacted. Sona BLW, 40% of the revenues comes from US. For Bharat Forge, it's about 35 to 40%. They supply forging and parts to North American markets. Balkrishna Industries is an auto ancillary company you should keep on your radar. We understand 15 to 20% revenues come from the US. For Eicher Motors, the impact is said to be minimal. Just about 2% of the Royal Enfield volumes cater to the US markets.
Reema and Shireen, with auto components, right, I remember we speaking to Ramakrishna Forgings, which has exports, Reema, and you were on Bazaar, right? And, there's one specific thing. They said, there are some auto components which are tariffed at that, basically because those tariffs were imposed at 25% after that Section 232 investigation. And they told us, well, while all tariffs go down to 18, hopefully, but there are specifics which stay at 25. So, it's for the auto sector. I think we still have to get some detail because it's not blanket.
And in fact, let me read out verbatim what it says as far as the auto sector is concerned. It says preferential access for automotive parts. The US will provide a preferential tariff rate quota for automotive parts that were previously subject to higher national security tariffs under US law. This means Indian auto part exporters get better access to the US market with non-preferred suppliers. But autos are not fully tariff-free yet. The framework does not immediately eliminate all US tariffs on fully built automobiles. Instead, it protects parts under a preferential quota. Full tariff reduction or elimination for finished vehicles would likely be part of later stages of the interim deal or the broader bilateral trade agreement. So auto is something that we will, we will need more clarity on as well.
Yeah. It doesn't look like, when they use tariff rate quota, typically what that implies is, it's not a blanket tariff removal.
Correct.
So a specific amount of, say, Indian auto parts can enter at a lower rate and then it kind of goes higher in a graded fashion. Typically, that is how this would work. But as you said, we will need, and we'll try and get some of these auto representatives. Maybe we could try and get Ramakrishna Forgings back on the air to get a quick perspective. But, the other big one, of course, is oil, Sonal. And, so that 25% goes immediately. So just start with the basic. How much are... do we know if Russian oil purchases is down to what now? It's negligible now, right? Sorry, Shireen, go on.
Thank you so much for that, Prashant. Well, it was all about the Russian oil purchases, right, that led to that 25% penal tariff that came by. Now, remember, in this particular statement, they speak about 500 billion of US energy products, amongst a lot of other things that will be bought by India in this particular deal. I will come to crude oil in just a bit, but just getting to the gas part, because that was another thing that all the analysts on the street were talking about as well, that US wants to export their gas to India, which is a big market, and that is something which had already started happening. In November 2025, India announced a major LPG term deal for US LPG. They signed 2.2 million tons per annum, which is around 10% of the total import volume right now with the US. So that was a big deal that we entered into in November itself. GAIL also in India Energy Week spoke about the fact that they want to look at 15-year LNG supply agreement for 1 million metric tons per year from US plants. And do remember, US is the second biggest LNG exporter to India after Qatar. So they were planning to add on more volumes to that. So this is one part of this particular deal that we should talk about as well, because gas imports are also really big for India. As far as crude is concerned, now do remember, Russian crude oil imports in December came in at a 38-month low at $2.7 billion. Yes, they are lower than what we saw earlier, but we were still importing from non-sanctioned entities, and we spoke to a lot of companies. They indicated buying from non-sanctioned entities is an economic decision. They are not buying from sanctioned entities, two entities in the Russian crude market. Imports from US at the same time, they grew 31% on a YY basis from December levels, which came at $569.3 million. Now remember, that was still lower than Russian oil in the month of December. This is as per some stats. So we have to see which way things go. We are still importing, but that is from non-sanctioned entities. But looks like we wouldn't do that according to the statement. But numbers from January and February will be key to watch.
No, absolutely, Sonal. Thanks very much for putting that into perspective. And the point on LNG is also an important point that you make. And that is something that the oil minister, Hardeep Puri, has been on record. And that's clearly going to be part of the energy import that we do from the US. But again, just to put those numbers in perspective, as Sonal was pointing out, and there was a lot of numbers there. So again, here for the benefit of our viewers, you know, we have been decreasing our import from Russia. While our statement is silent, what we have said in Parliament is that India will continue to diversify its energy imports, and has also said that we will, of course, look at importing more from the US. We have not said in our statement that we are going to zero as far as Russia is concerned, but the US executive order makes it explicit that India has said we will not buy Russian crude. It also explicitly states that there will be a reversal or a bringing back of the ad valorem duty if India were to continue to purchase Russian crude. Now, here's the data, as Sonal was pointing out. And this is the latest data for the month of December. Russian imports are down 33% compared to November, and still accounts for about 25% of India's overall oil imports in December. So, you know, we're still a large buyer of Russian crude, Prashant, and this is going to have to be watched closely, because something that the Trump administration says it's going to be watching closely. But let's bring in Mr. Surana, former CMD of HPCL, with us. Mr. Surana, many thanks for joining us. Let's start with this. The US explicitly in its executive order saying it's bringing down the tariff to 25%, removing the punitive Russian oil-related tariffs because India has committed to zero Russian purchase. It also holds out a warning that if India were to go back to purchasing Russian crude, the ad valorem duty could be brought back. Now, given the fact that we're still importing significant quantities of Russian oil, is this feasible, even though our statement is silent on it?
Good morning, Shireen, and all the viewers. First part is we don't buy the crude for the day. We buy the crude almost 1 or 2 months in advance. It is to be tied up. So the question is that irrespective of the statements, it will never happen that today you decide and today you stop it to zero. So that's not going to happen. First part. So it may happen over a period of time. Now, the total crude supply from Russia has reduced in recent times. It is not zero. That is one part. Of course, the Indian government confirmation has to come in the way this will be negotiated. But yes, there are contours which suggest that the Russian imports will reduce. Whether it will become zero, that we need to see, because we have got one refinery in the country which is purely dependent on the Russian crude as of today. As far as so I will put, these are two different issues, buying from Russia or not Russia and buying from US or not US. These are two different issues altogether. Also, a penal tariff on Indian goods in lieu of Russian import is different than the trade deal, though it was a sticking point. So as far as the Russian issue is concerned, I would see that that is a contextual issue and a temporary issue. That temporary thing has gone longer than what it was expected.
Yeah. Mr. Surana,
the tariff deal is long term.
Yeah. Mr. Surana, morning. So now this is sanctioned, non-sanctioned, doesn't matter, right? I mean, the executive order says directly, indirectly, Russian Federation. That's the terminology used. So now it is not, I mean, at least that's what the US side is saying in the executive order.
I would suppose that probably it is not differentiating between the sanctioned and non-sanctioned entities.
Correct.
But it is saying that from Russia. So what happens if the Russian crude is coming not from Russia, from somewhere else? But of course, there are terminologies like directly, indirectly. So we need to see slightly a detail of it.
Yeah.
And in the past, such type of things have been negotiated or navigated, even when there were Iran things, etc., etc. But because in this case, it is connected to trade deal also. So it will be more cautiously dealt with.
Yeah. You know, I just want to bring in, and this is related to oil. I mean, it's all connected directly, indirectly. That Shireen, that $500 billion number, right? And I think we went back and forth when that was announced in that sense, right? As a large number. But look at the language in the joint statement. It says India intends to purchase.
Yes.
Right? So I think it's not like a binding a gun to the head, you got to do it. So I think we intends to purchase. I mean, now, so I think that's a pretty good outcome for India in that sense. And we've kind of maybe been able to negotiate and put that language in because it doesn't, because when it was put out, right, unilaterally by President Trump on Monday, it sounded like, well, you know, this is it. This is very much part of it. And you don't get 18 till you agree to this. But I think the language is intends to purchase, which I think is a softer way to put it. Yeah.
We'll also have to wait to see because that is a separate signing. That's part of the larger commitment to the 18, which is still work in progress, and that, as the Commerce Minister said, is likely to happen sometime in March. So yes, that is definitely it leaves wriggle room. And as we were pointing out, even on that day, I mean, to say that there is a commitment to purchase worth $500 billion, that was a bit of a stretch in any case. That's clear, but it's also interesting because what has been now specified from the US statement is that this purchase will also, of course, include aircraft and so on and so forth, but also GPUs for data centers and so on and so forth. So that's the additional details that we have, which of course is something that India has been hoping to get more of. So that's good news as well. But Vikas Kimani also with us, and we've got our other guests. So let's bring them in. Vikas, many thanks for joining us. So as of today, 25 goes, 50 becomes 25. The road to 18 is still awaited, but your first thoughts?
No, I think, it's very clear that, India and US deal was in works, and finally I'm glad that it got announced recently, and now details will be worked out with governments have kind of clearly specified that details will come out. So I think good part is that in some sense, negatives are behind, and I'm seeing now there's a conducive environment to make the relationship work. I'm sure there was a stage set for that, before the deal, Venezuela oil was opened up for India to start. So I'm sure there's a whole series of events. Now, I don't think anywhere it's being said, this is how it has to pan out immediately for it to kick off. But I think we had whatever coldness in the relationship is behind us. Now, both sides are working towards to making it happen. I'm sure there will be still trades-off which will happen given the sensitivity of the both sides. But it has to be seen in a broader context, how the statements have come out. And I think it is, a great part about this is this, in this crisis, India has sorted out many things, that FTA with EU, FTA with many other countries, and including now US. So I think India, stands in a very, very solid position. And this does not mean that there are no, everything is open. There are no, those things were part of the normal game earlier also, and that will continue in times to come. There will be some minute details.
Monday morning, Vikas, what does this mean, Monday morning?
I think it's positive. I don't think it's like Monday morning. It is positive. Ever since US deal has got announced, it is. I don't think there's another gap opening case of like another few percentage, but progressively it is getting better, and Indian economy is doing well. So, I have been, on your channel and other channels clearly saying that I think that the sentiments have clearly changed. It will improve gradually. Still, Monday morning, it only changes from the point of view that there were a lot of skeptics around US deal still. This adds one more clarity to them. So I do believe that it will be only positive. Now, how much positive, time will say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because we've discussed this, and it doesn't look like there is, I mean, there was some anxiety out there that there is going to be a bit of a slip between the headline announcement and when the detail is put out. But doesn't look like there is too much, slip. The only thing is, as we started, Shireen and I started by saying, we don't have a date for, so tariffs from today is 25 on Indian exports. When does 25 go to 18? We don't have a date. That's all. And the statement says they're going to work on it promptly and hopefully it'll get done soon as well. And I just want to go back. Yeah.
Sean, if you see, when we interact with most of the corporates, that actually biggest worry was that 25, not really others, because, some parts, there were a lot of workarounds up till 25. But, the additional 25 was the biggest bother of most corporates. And so to that extent, I think that, in my opinion, is comforting. But more clarity, of course, is always welcome, and I'm sure it will come in times to come.
Yeah. The effective tariff rate, Vikas and Abhijit Das is also with us, and we have MK Surana as well. The effective tariff rate for India at 18% is almost actually 17%. I mean, it's actually 16 point something because there are these exemptions for electronics, etc. So actually, it is just under 17%. The effective, if whenever that 18% comes to, happens. Sonal is with us, and I just want to go back to her. Because if you look at the NSE 500 this week, the biggest gainer on the NSE 500 was Aarti Industries, was up 18-19%. And that big move came on Tuesday morning once we got that deal announcement. So chemicals, very, very sensitive, Sonal. Tell us more. How is the sector impacted?
Oh, they are absolutely. Total exports that India does in terms of chemicals, 20% goes to the US. That's around $6 billion in terms of value. And we spoke to a whole host of companies. They did indicate that the tariff cut that has come by will be a big positive because a lot of them were absorbing the tariffs and it was impacting their profits. There is a brokerage note which indicated as well that it will give all these companies an operating leverage as export volumes will likely recover by 20 to 25% because a lot of them had been absorbing that 50% tariff portion in their costs as well, hitting their profits. Halving the tariffs allows them to drop their prices slightly to gain volumes in this particular economy. And if tariffs on China remain high, which is the case now for chemicals, India will gain some momentum in the US markets and global markets as well. So the China plus one theme could be possible if these tariffs are levied, and that is the indication. So it is a positive. The stocks of SRF, Aarti Industries, Naveen Fluorine, all of them have 20 to 25% exposure to the US markets. They were indicating it has come in as a setback, but now looks like it is a relief, and that's why all these stocks could be in focus.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Sonal. It's going to be an interesting space. Vinny is also with us on textiles, right? Gokuldas exports 40% in 2 days. Down and out and really kicked around, but it's back. And it's a labor-intensive sector, large number of people. So just take us through that as well, Vinny.
Absolutely. And Prashant, like you mentioned, right, Gokuldas export was that stock which indicates what the US trade deal is happening, at least for textile players. And Gokuldas export, if you talk about that has the most exposure, 70% exposure. This is what happened before the tariffs were implemented. That export number went down to somewhere around 55 to 60. So now again, this penalty tariff coming off, the effective rate coming down to 18% becomes a very big positive for most of these textile players. So Gokuldas export, Wellspun Living, Indocount Industries, all of them have some exposure in the range of 60 to 70%. All global, Indocount Industries, Arvind, all of them also have 30+% exposure. KPR Mill also among that. And do not forget, if this is an effective rate of 18% that we're talking about, then it's much better than whether you look at something like Vietnam, China. So that also benefit comes in where people are moving or companies are moving more towards Vietnam, China, Bangladesh. That could come back to India as well, given that it will become more cost effective for them. And in terms of market share that India has in the US for ready-made garments, imports, that's around 6%. So a possibility of that increasing is surely a positive for all these companies.
Vinny, thank you very much for that. Mihir Vora is also with us. Mihir, good morning. It's been a busy day, week, month for all of us, but in a good way, Mihir, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't complain. At least this is much better than last weekend when global commodity prices were collapsing all over the place. So this is I'll take this weekend any day. But I think the happiest part is that it's done. There are still, I think, some percentage of the market, which was saying that it'll still take time before the fine print comes out, etc. Now the fine print is also out, and it should go a long way in stabilizing the currency, in getting kick-started with the FDI and FII inflow cycle, and I think more importantly, what's also happened is that since we have also done the other key markets like US, EU, Canada, etc. Canada almost done, New Zealand, Australia, etc. The TAM, as I think Vinny was mentioning, it will increase in a lot of the segments. So I don't think we should only look at companies and try to analyze currently what's the proportion of exports which was impacted because of these tariffs, and that portion will get benefited, etc. It's not only a question of undoing that, because now we are on an even footing or even better footing with some countries like Vietnam, Thailand, to some extent, China, etc., and Bangladesh in textiles, etc. The addressable market actually will open up much more than what the current situation is. So it's, I think, compared to 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, I think the whole 5 or 10 year picture has changed for a lot of industries like textiles, gems and jewelry, chemicals, to some extent pharmaceuticals, auto ancillaries, and that can have a good long-term re-rating on these stocks and sectors.
Absolutely. Vikas is also with us. Vikas, for two sectors, right? One is pharma. Was there any? So they're saying that they're going to get a negotiated rate lower, but it's going to be contingent on this Section 232 investigation, which is on account of national security. So that is. I don't think. I mean, beyond the general impression I got from analysts and companies, etc., is that the belief is it's essential. US anyway is trying to lower the cost of drugs for consumers there, and this kind of sort of helps in that effort. So not too worrying, right? Even though the statement does say for generic pharma, it's dependent on these investigations.
I think, very clearly, even in the peak of the tariff, they didn't raise the pharma thing because it's very critical. India in generic market is the leader there, almost 40% plus share. If they were to do that, it is only kind of negative for their medical cost, which they are again struggling with. So I don't think there's any chance, in my opinion, I would find a very low probability of it coming back on pharma when it didn't come earlier. And I think generally speaking, in my opinion, a lot of sectors will open up. Still export of India to US is very less. With this clarity, the momentum which was building before tariff situation got lost in last 1 year. Now I think, you will start seeing a big pickup in having variety of the sectors. There are many sectors apart from textiles and auto components where India was building capability and which was a potential US market, which I think, will gain again momentum. So usual sectors like chemicals, textiles, auto components will surely benefit. But I do believe that in fullness of time, in next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, many new segments will come about as an opportunity for Indian companies.
Both of you, Vikas and Mihir, both of you have made this point that don't just look at the exports of current companies, but other markets open up as well. I'm just purely, for a second, playing the devil's advocate here. There is the underlying competitiveness issue as well, right? Tariffs are one thing. I mean, rupee has gone from 50 to 90. That should have given a huge boost to competitiveness, right? But has it? You can argue and say it has not. So there is an underlying, I want to be optimistic and hopeful, etc. But there is Vikas, you would agree there is an underlying competitiveness issue as well?
If you must understand that India over last 5-7 years has improved on its competitiveness vis-a-vis even China and many other countries. Our labor costs are one of the cheapest in 1/3 of China. Our power costs have come down significantly over last many years. Logistics costs are improving, and earlier we did not have size and scale in many sectors and segments. Where today India is becoming large and big, whether it is auto component or many where India has already built size and scale. So I think it's wrong to say that India does not have cost competitiveness in every segment. But yes, there are segments where we still are inferior to China. But it's all fullness of time. As we build size and scale, we will also get there. But I don't think India is as uncompetitive. And again, India is very good at where the volumes are low. China is very good where volumes are massive. And India is displayed in segments like textiles, auto component, chemicals, specialty chemicals in a big way. I think, it's a progression. I would not worry as much as about competitiveness. Of course, a lot of work needs to be done. So I'm not saying we need to be complacent. But I think from a rate of change perspective, from a growth perspective, we have enough and more to on our side over next many years.
Right. Yes, as you point out, that this is going to be a long-term opportunity and a medium-term opportunity to consider as well, not just in the immediate term. Let me get Abhijit into the conversation. Abhijit, we've been, of course, trying to decode what the fine print essentially means for India, for the economy, but more importantly, for the micros and for the markets. Abhijit, your take now that we have a little bit more clarity and certainty on the rate itself and, of course, the sectors that are impacted.
Thank you, Shireen, for having me on your program. I have been listening very carefully to what the other panelists have been saying. I share much of their optimism, but we also need to recognize that under President Trump, there is never going to be any certainty. So while the tariffs have been cut, the oil tariff has gone and the 25% should come down to 18. How long this situation will prevail really depends on President Trump's whims and fancies. We need to recognize that, and we must not be complacent that this offers certainty. Definitely, it's a great news for textiles and clothing, leather, gems and jewelry, marine sector, no doubt about it. But certain sectors need to carefully watch out what is likely to happen in the future. And here I have in my mind processed food products, particularly those which depend on fresh fruits. If we decode the joint statement, perhaps India has agreed to reduce tariffs on fresh fruits and the downstream processing industry. So that is one bit of decoding that may be relevant. But there are 2 or 3 other very important points to watch out for. And there I must compliment the Indian negotiators. There are 2 areas where US has succeeded in extracting very far-reaching concessions from many countries, particularly Malaysia and Cambodia. US is clearly trying to extract concessions along those lines from India. We have not conceded ground, but those issues are not off the negotiating table. And let me point out a couple of those issues. First and foremost relates to addressing long-standing barriers to the trade of US food and agri products. Now, if you look at the US-Malaysia Bilateral Trade Agreement, there what Malaysia has committed to effectively is setting aside its domestic food laws and allowing import consignments from US if it's accompanied with the respective certificate from US authorities. Now, we've not managed to get rid of this issue from the negotiating table, but at the same time, we've not conceded ground on this. We need to keep an eye on this over the next few months. And the second issue which I wanted to point out was in respect of strengthening economic security through complementary actions for addressing non-market policies of third countries, cooperation on investment and export controls. Again, let me go back to the US-Malaysia trade agreement. There, on many issues, Malaysia appears to have ceded considerable sovereignty and agreed to align its policies with US domestic interest. We have resisted it, but again, we've not managed to get rid of this issue from the negotiating table. So this is another point which we need to keep our eyes on very carefully. So Shireen, at this juncture, based on the information available, these were the 3 or 4 broad points which I wanted to share in respect of decoding this joint statement.
No, that's very important and important aspects that you mentioned there, Abhijit. And in fact, not just related to tariffs, there are many non-tariff barriers that the US has spoken about in its statement as well. There's a lot of harmonization of standards, etc., that they also talk about. But to your point on agri as well as processed foods, again, for the benefit of our viewers, here's what India has said, and this is, I'm reading from the Indian statement, not from the US statement. I'm reading from the Indian statement. India will eliminate or reduce tariffs on all US industrial goods and a wide range of US food and agricultural products, including dried distillers' grains, red sorghum for animal feed, tree nuts, fresh and processed fruit, soybean, oil, wine, and spirits, and additional products. So this is the Indian statement itself. Abhijit, I'll come back to you on those non-tariff barriers as well as some of those, quality orders, etc., that the US has spoken about. But Prashant, back to the markets.
Yeah, I mean, and Shireen, I can tell you, there's this much-needed reprieve we've seen in US stocks as well. You know, we were bracing what US will do overnight. Well, US has recovered. Nasdaq is up nicely, and S&P is up as well. So Monday, you've got this agreement, and then you've got a bit of a reprieve into US stocks. So I guess not all that bad. Mir is with us. Mir, what's the approach now, really? This has come through markets, of course, always look ahead, right? It's not about where, as they say, the puck is now, but where it is 12 months out. So in that sense, what's your sense? How are you going to approach things and approach investing from here out?
So Prashant, I find very few or probably no reasons to be negative now on the market. We've had time correction, we've had price correction. We've seen the worst of geopolitical situation in terms of the Operation Sindoor and then, of course, the 50% tariffs, which were much worse than expected, and the worst of the currency and hopefully the worst of FII outflows. So markets are where we are in spite of all these negatives, and all these negatives which we talked about are now undone. So apart from any major global issue or event, I don't see any now other reason for us to be negative on the Indian markets. The only competition that probably we continue to have is from the US tech stocks and the AI-linked themes which we have in certain pockets in China, Taiwan, Korea, which probably sucked away some money from India. But now even that AI hype is being questioned. So if we see some cooling down of this AI hype, then India should start getting back its original rightful share of global money. And that's the only thing that we are waiting for, I think. So I see very few reasons to be negative on the market now.
All right. Well, hopefully Monday morning is going to be a good trading session on the back of positive global cues, the relief that we're seeing in the US after that massive tech sell-off, and of course more clarity emerging on the India-US trade deal and the effective tariff rate now being brought down to 25% starting today. Amir, many thanks for joining us. Let me bring in our other experts. We've got with us Ambassador Kamal Sibal and also Jayant Dasgupta. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on a Saturday morning. Mr. Sibal, let me start by asking you, effective today, the punitive Russian oil-related tariffs go. So we're down from 50% to 25%. But here's what I want to understand from you. The executive order that the US has issued makes it very clear, and the word used is specifically because India has given a commitment and assurance to bring down, actually to eliminate its purchase of Russian crude oil together. The Indian statement makes no mention of that. Mr. Sibal, to start with, your thoughts on that, and also the fact that the executive order then also goes on to say that the Trump administration could bring back the ad valorem duty of 25% and other additional measures if they find, and they say in the statement that they're monitoring the situation, if they find that India has resumed purchasing Russian oil.
Well, this struck me also. This is plain political bullying because because the United States itself is actively negotiating economic opportunities with Russia while they are addressing the Ukraine conflict separately. They are also engaged in direct talks about how they can resume some kind of economic cooperation. So with that in view, I can't understand why they are intent on blocking any Indian purchase of Russian oil. That's one part. The other is that, trade with the United States is absolutely disconnected, unconnected with our purchase of Russian oil. There is no linkage between the two, but they have created this political linkage, which is very unfortunate. Number three, that some Russian oil companies are still not sanctioned. And therefore, theoretically, Indian companies can buy oil which is put on the spot market by these companies without violating US sanctions. But in the text that you have read, there is supposed to be a blanket ban on Russia buying any Indian oil directly or indirectly. And then they are saying, which is very galling, that they will monitor the situation, which means that the pressure point will remain and they can reimpose tariffs on us. So this is a leverage that United States and Trump himself doesn't want to give up, and it makes no sense, and it puts us in a very embarrassing situation with Russia, I can tell you, because Russia would understand that we will have to make some compromises with the United States on the purchase of Russian oil. But the manner in which this has been projected in this framework agreement, that or whatever the US has said, that India cannot at all buy any Russian oil, and this will be monitored by the United States. Now, it is a fact that our oil purchases from Russia have got reduced, will get reduced, but I think it will be a political problem if we yielded to this US blackmail on this point and create some misunderstandings with Russia. So I don't know how we're going to manage this, but there is a problem down the road.
There certainly is a problem, as you point out, Ambassador Sibal. Let me get Ambassador Sajanhar into the conversation as well. So thanks very much for joining us. To just take forward what Ambassador Sibal was speaking of, and again, I want to read out from the executive order itself. The executive order says the U.S. Secretary of Commerce is directed to monitor whether India resumes directly or indirectly importing Russian Federation oil, and that if India resumes Russian oil imports, senior officials shall recommend whether that's President Trump, should reimpose the additional ad valorem rate of duty of 25% or take other measures. Now, it seems then, Ambassador Sajanhar, that this would qualify as a tenuous peace because, India has maintained, even in Parliament just day before yesterday, that we will continue to look at our strategic autonomy. We will, of course, diversify our oil imports. But even as of the month of December, our oil imports from Russia are down 33%, but they're still 25% of our overall oil imports.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shireen, for having me. You're very right. The way I will characterize it is that it is not a friendly act. President Trump keeps on saying that, he's great respect for Prime Minister Modi. He's a great man. He's a great friend. This is not a friendly act at all. This is something you're keeping the Damocles sword hanging over India's head. And I agree with Ambassador Sibal, what he has said, that it puts us in an embarrassing position with Russia. But even more so, if I could say that domestically, politically, it will create big problems. It will create huge problems for India because we know that there is the opposition that has been baying for the government's blood on a variety of reasons. And, the 5 points that Jairam Ramesh has come up with this morning, this is on top of it that we are giving up on our strategic autonomy. So I think domestically also, it is not going to be helpful at all. In fact, it's going to be very harmful for the manner in which the Indian government is able to take it forward. The other point is that the overall, what we call the comprehensive global strategic partnership between India and the United States. And of course, there have been many wrinkles, there have been many obstacles that have appeared over the last 8 to 10 months. But trade deal was the most obvious of it and was the most overt part of it. There were others also, like US expanding relations with Pakistan, the fact that the Indo-Pacific and the Quad had been put to one side, etc. But the trade deal was the one that was being commented upon, and that was having the most severe impact. And it was being thought that once the trade deal is out of the way, then we will be able to try to shore up the balance of the partnership, the rest of the relationship. Defense is moving, other things are moving, maybe Quad Summit will also take place. But by specifically bring also, Shireen, the use of the language that we will continue to monitor as if it's some super body that is going to oversee this. And mind you, this is being done in a case where there are no sanctions at all as concerned. There's only a price cap. India has never violated that price cap also, although there is no sanctity, international global sanctity to it. We've not done it. There are no sanctions. Other countries are importing. China is importing. EU itself is importing from Russia. United States is importing. But there is no restriction or any penalty being imposed on them.
No, you're absolutely right, Ambassador Sajjanhar. Let me also bring back...
Last point I'll make is, as a result of these actions, it was the trust that had been eroded very severely.
Yes.
And we were hoping that possibly there would be efforts to restore that trust. But with comments like this, statements like this has further receded as far as the two countries are concerned. Shri.
Yes. Thank you, Ambassador Sajjanhar. Let me also bring back in Mr. Surana, the former CMD of HPCL, to really understand how this is going to work on the ground. Mr. Surana, it's clear now, and the fact is that we will have to import more from the US. I think that's clear. Now, whether we go to zero on Russia is a different matter altogether, but we do need to import more from the US. What does that mean in terms of costs to start with? What will it also mean in terms of our capacity, our refinery capacity to be able to import more and use more from the US? So, give us a practical view, a reality check on how all of this is going to work.
So as far as US crudes are concerned, the Indian refineries can process those crudes. As far as Venezuelan crudes are concerned, some refineries can process, not all the refineries can process. As far as the import of crude is concerned, what refineries do is that they've got the optimization models and they see which gives the best value to them. And that best value is derived based on the gross product value which the crude will generate, the freight cost, the crude cost, and the cracks. And therefore, one thing we need to understand is that only the crude price or the freight does not determine the value of a crude. And so I assume that, and we have done in the past also, that there is a differential which is arbitrage available between WTI crude and the Brent crude. And many of the crude from US has found favor in spite of the freight disadvantage. Now, currently the freight cost is high because there are a lot of shadow fleets are being under radar. There are a lot of floating oil where the ships are being used. But if the freight cost normalized over a period, which I think should, in that case, the US crude may start finding favor even economically. Now, as far as the buyers are concerned, they need to evaluate it techno-economically, ensuring that they are not putting all their eggs in one basket. So I think practically it will be evaluated techno-economically and the refineries will have intent to buy the best crude, which gives the best value to them. And as far as diversification is concerned, that will have the strategic control. And I do assume that some of the crude, US crude will start finding favor. And as far as freight cost is concerned, whether Russia or US, both have got the disadvantage. So basically, we need to compare vis-a-vis the Middle East crudes or the African crudes as far as the freight cost is concerned. There, the US has got a disadvantage. But at the same time, if they have to compete and get their products here, probably they have to make it competitive vis-a-vis the alternatives which are available. And it has happened in the past. And it happens currently also. So I do think that will happen. The second part is as far as LPG, LNG, ethane is concerned, US will find their products coming here, and that is also another source which may find in our import basket, especially LNG and LPG.
Yes, I think LNG and LPG has been made clear by the Petroleum Minister himself. But let me bring in Mr. Jayant Dasgupta as well. Mr. Dasgupta, morning. Many thanks for joining us, sir. Reading both these statements, what do you make of the language, as well as the fact that while 50 has come to 25, neither statement make any timelines or indicate any specific timelines for the 18. And that, of course, the Commerce Minister says we hope will be done by March. But what do you believe we now need to see in terms of the next steps, and how easy do you think it's going to be to close this to 18, given some of the complications and challenges that were raised?
It's not going to be easy at all to close this deal, because I think still there is a wide gap between the expectations of the two sides. The US expects almost all its industrial products to be allowed access at zero duty. And that is going to be a problem, because with immediate effect, if that is what the US wants, we have not given that even to the EU. There is a phase-out period ranging between 5 to 10 years. So that is something which will have to be reconciled by the US. The second point, which I think Ambassador Sibal has mentioned, and that is about the blackmail on the oil issue. That is something, again, because it puts a huge amount of uncertainty in the whole deal. Even if India were to agree to, let's say, a host of concessions to the US on other industrial products, if, because the sanctions are only on Lukoil and Rosneft at the moment. There are a host of Russian companies which are not under sanction. So that is, again, going to put pressure. The last point I wanted to mention is that the US Supreme Court ruling may come out any day. Of course, it was supposed to come out in January, it didn't. So if the Supreme Court were to rule that the US, President Trump's tariffs are not bona fide under the IEPA, then there would be a new chapter opened up in the negotiations. And India should then start, I think, from a different footing altogether, because the US's imposition of even 18% would be called into question. And of course, the Jamieson Greer, the USTR, has mentioned that the tariffs would come back the very next day. But that is something which is up in the air. So there are a lot of uncertainties. And if the Indian side manages to get what it wants by the end of March, well and good. But I'm not very hopeful about that.
Just to point out, sir, that India has accepted, and I'm reading again from the Indian statement this time, India will eliminate or reduce tariffs on all US industrial goods and a wide range of US food and agriculture products, including dried distillers, grains, red sorghum for animal feed, tree nuts, fresh and processed fruit, soybean oil, wine and spirits, and additional products. So we have committed to eliminate or reduce tariffs on all US industrial goods and a wide range of US food and agri products. That's what I wanted to point out.
Come in.
That's good. And I'm bringing Prashant back into the conversation.
Shane, sorry, I just wanted to come in because, that industrial goods point, right? And I checked that out earlier when this deal was announced, right? The value of, we import very little from US with industrial goods, machinery, etc. I mean, it's under $3 billion. And I think what, the ambassador said, that, we've not given that deal to EU. The value of industrial goods imports into India is actually almost 4 times what we import from the US. So the numbers are very different. And I think that perhaps, because this stuff would be done line by line, and it's a large category, but I mean, EU is at least 4 times what we import from the US in that sense. I just wanted to ask one question to Ambassador Sibal. Ambassador Sibal, I heard you said, well, what, and I'm paraphrasing you're saying, well, it almost seems like giving a deal, but grudgingly, and allowing for some concessions, but at least trying to keep India on a tight leash, if that's the right phrase to use. I'm sorry to reduce this to a binary kind of a number question, but on a scale of 10, sir, from an Indian perspective, how would you rate the deal that we know so far?
Oh, I think it's a good thing that we've had this deal, despite some problems we may have down the road, as Ambassador Dasgupta has mentioned. But on the whole, it improves the atmosphere in our ties, and it breaks the downward slide in our ties at various levels, including what has been mentioned so often, that the trust between the two countries was being eroded. So this is out of the way, which is why our Prime Minister and others have welcomed this deal. I think the business community will welcome this deal. It eliminates a lot of uncertainties in the relationship going ahead. Now we have a broad picture of what the two sides are agreeing. So in that sense, I would give a very positive rating to the deal. However, I think this whole business of Russian oil is actually totally extraneous to the deal. And as was mentioned by Ashok Sajanhar, this is a point I also intended to mention, that China is the biggest buyer of Russian oil. And Trump is very gung-ho on his relationship with Xi and with China and his visit there in April and everything else. And there are other countries that are also buying Russian oil, including in Europe. But there is no mention of putting any tariffs on them. So this is a lever that he's using to extract concessions from us and leaving it up in the air. And I feel personally, it's very mortifying that they should use this kind of a language, that they will ask Lieutenant or Greer, whoever it is, to monitor very closely whether we are buying Russian oil or not, and then reserve the option of not reimposing tariffs, but take other measures, which is there in this language. This is pure bullying.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to create a problem, and this is unfortunate. And it will have an impact on our relations with Russia, because it would seem that we are yielding on a point on which we have not yielded earlier, and we've stood our ground.
Yeah.
And we've explained it on the basis that we have safeguarded, preserved our strategic autonomy. And now, if we agree to this, I doubt it. I doubt if any commitment has been made. Now, let me conclude by saying, if we had actually, as Trump said in his Truth Social post, that Prime Minister has told him that he will not buy Russian oil, if this was really what was said, then there's no reason for this kind of language to appear in the framework agreement. So it's quite clear we have not made such a commitment, and therefore I think it's going to be an issue which is going to trouble.
Ambassador Sibbal, so on one point, right, that $500 billion import number, the joint statement is a bit of a climb down compared to what we saw earlier. Earlier, the language was committed. Now it says India intends to purchase $500 billion, right? So it's a bit of a softening of the language. But on the Russia bit, it seems like there is no softening. But I asked this question to M.K. Surana earlier. He runs HPCL for many years. And whether both sanctioned and non-sanctioned, this covers both sanctioned and non-sanctioned. He said, well, looks like the language covers directly, indirectly, everything. But I think there's an important distinction perhaps we need to clarify. Because if it leaves a way out, for the US to kind of sort of, be strong for the domestic audience, but, get this done without seeming like they're backing off. I don't know. I'm just saying that there is a bit of a softening on this one big issue, which generated a lot of heat here in India. And on the Russia bit, I don't know if there is more clarity needed, Shireen. Yeah, go on.
No, and just going back to Ambassador Sibbal's point, I think what is worrying is the fact that this is no longer Truth Social. This is not President Trump posting something on Truth Social. This is part of the executive order. And it also then talks about consequences of repurchasing Russian oil. That's the word used. So I think that's the worry there. And the fact that you ostensibly said that Scott Bessent the Commerce Secretary is Howard Lutnick is going to be monitoring this and will inform President Trump and the administration of India's decision to buy or continuation of buying. So I think the fact that this is now part of the executive order is the concern that I think is being expressed. It's no longer a post on Truth Social. So, and it brings back into question the fact that this cut from 50 to 25 is now being linked squarely to this issue, and then further to the issue of 18 perhaps as well. So let me quickly get closing comments then from Ambassador Sajanhar, Sibbal, and Mr. Dasgupta as well. Mr. Sajanhar, the fact that this is no longer, as I said, President Trump tweeting or posting on it on Truth Social. It's part of the executive order. Does that further make this negotiation more complex?
Yes, thank you, Shireen. I quite agree with you. I think this is one unnecessary item that has appeared in this agreement. Without this, the whole executive order, whatever might be the other details that would come out in due course of time by March. But the sort of language and the sort of definitive language, strong language, and very uh, biting, cutting language. I think this is totally uncalled for, and this is what I'm worried about, of course, in terms of the impact on India's ties with Russia, but also domestically, the sort of impact. And this one issue of the strategic autonomy is going to be taken up by the opposition, because all the others, in terms of our exports to the US market, increase of exports, etc., there might also be, some votaries of, who would say that we need to open up our markets, and this is good that, we are bringing down our tariffs. It is good that we will become part of the global supply chains, etc., etc. So I think all those arguments, also what Jairam Ramesh has said, that exports of US to the Indian market are going to grow up 3 times. All those aspects, issues can be challenged. But this one coming with such peremptory sort of language, and then putting a person like Howard Lutnick, meaning that is, who is not at all sympathetic. We've heard the sort of comments and statements that came from people like him and Peter Navarro and Scott Bessent and all that. They're not at all sympathetic in terms of, that it is necessary for both countries to work together and to take it forward. He was the one who said that Mr. Modi will come to Trump's table and say sorry and tell me what we need to do further and all that. So I think this is leaves a very bad taste in the mouth. On the other elements, and this is frankly should not be a part of a trade deal because it has no place there. But this is what really takes away all the benefits and advantages that we have been able to get out of this deal. Shireen.
Right. Mr. Dasgupta, wrapping comments from you, sir, on the back of, overarching now where this leaves the bilateral relationship and also the opportunities, especially at least as far as our export-intensive, labor-intensive sectors were concerned, who were really hit hard by that 50% tariff. So at least immediate reprieve for gems, jewelry, textile, apparel, all of those sectors to start with. And of course, then, the building and the acceleration of the relationship and the trade engagement will be different, but immediate reprieve for a whole bunch of sectors.
I'll just make 3 or 4 comments. The first comment is that if this 18% were to be implemented immediately with regard to textiles and clothing, leather, gems and jewelry, footwear, etc., that would be a big relief to Indian exporters, because there has already been a shift from the US buyers to other countries. So that would be a big relief. The second point is that the relief of 18% on other exports of India, that has been tied up with the finalization of the interim arrangement or interim trade framework. And that is up in the air again. Because as you mentioned a while ago, Shireenji, it is about elimination or reduction of tariffs from the point of India. And if the reduction is not, let's say, completely to the satisfaction of the Trump administration, then they will reject it. So there is no finality to this 18% also. That is the short point that I'm trying to make as to when and for how long it will last. The next point is that there is a huge trust deficit. Let us not put too fine a point to it. And India would, I think, move towards this with, I think, a great deal of hesitation and, if I may say, circumspection. So it is not going to be easy. And again, because of President Trump's very mercurial temperament, there is no, saying how long it will last. Even if he were to sign on the dotted line an official document, he may go back on that and say 25% again, like was mentioned a while ago in the context of the Qatar agreement or the negotiations going on there. Yes. So I think it is good if it is implemented immediately. It will be good for as long as it lasts, but we don't have any certainty about how long it will last.
Yes, that is an important point that you make. But Ambassador Sibul, I'll give you the final words before we close. Sum up for us where this leaves things, where this leaves our relationship with the US, but more importantly, what this will also now mean in terms of the issues that the government will have to navigate.
Well, as was said earlier in the discussion, Trump cannot be fully trusted or relied on. He's very mercurial, very egocentric, and he uses a tariff as a bludgeon against all countries. And therefore, if his mood changes, he can easily reverse his decisions, as he's done in the case of South Korea, simply because South Korea, its parliament, did not ratify the trade deal. He has reimposed additional 25% sanctions on South Korea. So that uncertainty is there. That is one part. The other is, I'd like to reiterate what I said earlier, and it's an important point in terms of discussions between two sovereign countries. We are discussing a bilateral trade deal with the United States. So where does the issue of India buying Russian oil come in? I mean, that's a purely geopolitical issue, which they are related to Ukraine conflict and how we are helping indirectly, fuel this, fund this conflict by buying Russian oil, etc. So it's not a bilateral issue between India and the United States, but Trump has introduced this. And since the rationale of 25% tariffs, additional tariffs on India was because of our purchase of Russian oil, he's finding it very difficult to step back from there. So he's got to get his pound of flesh. And he's not satisfied simply by India reducing its oil purchases from Russia. He's gone further and said that India will not buy directly or indirectly.
Yeah.
That means even in the spot market, if Russian oil is available from non-sanctioned Russian oil companies with all the paperwork in order, we cannot buy it. So he has upped the ante in that sense, and then he's going to monitor this, which means that if he's not satisfied, he can take some very negative steps again by reimposing tariffs and stuff like that, which means that there is that bit of an uncertainty. However, and the second thing which I've noted was, Shireen, you yourself mentioned that immediately the tariffs will be slashed to 25%, which means that the gems and jewelry and all the labor-intensive products are not getting immediately the benefit of reduced tariffs. This will happen when the agreement is legalized, and then it will come down to 18%, which will then depend on some other points on which the United States will want some satisfaction or whatever it is. So there is that aspect that needs to be dealt with. And finally, I would again say what I repeated earlier, that if things go smoothly, it is a breakthrough in our ties, because this was actually casting a big shadow on our relationship. Even if the shadow is not completely lifted, nevertheless, the atmosphere will improve, and various other areas in which we are holding our dialogues, we will be able to proceed forward with some sense of confidence.
Ambassador Sibul and Shireen, I think everybody said, right? I think can't go out and say that, well, this is finally it with President Trump. You can never say that. But I'll just, on a lighter note, Shireen, say this, right? In markets, in financial markets, there is this thing which now people say that because he's so sensitive about the market staying up, right? He says, and the thing goes, if the stock market drops 2%, Trump will delete the truth, right? So let's just hope that you can use this with this, the Russia bit, which I think is absolutely, it's bullying, no doubt. But let's just hope he kind of sort of reverses that at some point as well. But yeah, I mean, that's the lighter side of it. But nevertheless, it's a step forward, I think, as everyone has said, Shireen.
Absolutely. I mean, again, what we do have is that cut from 50 to 25, which is a significant cut, Prashant, and that is in effect as of today. That is part of the executive order, so there is no uncertainty on that. the road to 18 is going to be a complex one to navigate, as all of our experts have pointed out. But the hope is that both sides will now get back to the table and try and thrash things out. And of course, at some point, India will have to address the elephant in the room, which is the issue of Russian oil. So far, we have chosen not to, but I guess given the fact that it's now part of the Trump executive order, India will have to address this issue and allay concerns around it, and perhaps also allay Russia's concerns. Remember, it's not just oil, it's a big defense partner as well. But there's going to be plenty more. It's another working weekend, and we'll keep updating you as the developments take shape. But stay tuned to CNBC TV18. Many thanks to Ambassador Sibal, Ambassador Sajan Har, Mr. Jayan Das Gupta, Abhijit Das, Mr. Surana, and all our other guests for joining us bright and early on a Saturday morning. Thanks very much.
Shireen, back on Sunday or stay in office? Or
well, I'm not wagering any bets on that, Prashant. As I said, as far as I'm concerned, we might as well not leave office. But thanks, gentlemen, for joining us here this morning, and we will appreciate your time again as and when there are further developments. So I hope you will be generous with your time for us. But thank you very much. Stay tuned to CNBC TV18. We'll be right back with a lot more.